Welcome to another conversation with a distinguished visitor to Hope College. Our guest today is Ambassador Ronald E. Neumann, President of the American Academy of Diplomacy and former United States Ambassador to Afghanistan. He's on our campus today as a part of the Great Decisions series, a program sponsored in conjunction with the World Affairs Council of West Michigan, of which Hope College is an education partner. Ambassador Neumann, welcome to Hope College.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
We're looking forward to your talk today to a larger audience, but I wonder if you might just tee that up for us by sharing a perspective on where we are in Afghanistan today, 16 years on beyond 9/11 and our initial invasion of that country.
Yeah, happy to. Afghanistan is a place that is of great interest to me. I first visited in 1967. My father actually was ambassador in Afghanistan, which makes us one of only two diplomatic father-sons that have ever run the same embassy, the last being, before us being John Adams and John Quincy Adams. Doesn't happen very often. So perhaps Afghanistan is in my blood. I say that only to acknowledge that I'm not a totally disinterested observer, but I've been going back regularly since I retired in 2007, in October of last year. And Afghanistan is a frightfully complex place, and short bumper stickers are almost always wrong. I guess what I would want to say is, first of all, the reasons we went and are still there are important. Both the counterterrorism, the fact that the Islamic State is now trying to get a foothold there as well. And there is, in fact, a basic success, if you could call it that, which is we have not been attacked. So I think people tend to forget things which didn't happen. But there's a lot that has gone wrong, and we've made a great many mistakes. One of the reasons we're still engaged so heavily is we tried to rush out under President Obama, leaving a great many things undone. Short is, I think that we do need to stay for a while. I think we need to define winning a bit differently in terms of preventing attacks on ourselves, our friends, and the counterterrorism platform, not some total absence of violence or surrender. There are certain increases, rather small, that we need to accomplish that strategy, but we need to be a little harder edged and much better at conditionality with the Afghan government on dealing with some of the issues of corruption and patronage, which I think are undercutting our effort. And those have to change if we are to stay. Now, that's the short version.
So if success for the United States is defined in terms of national security, what does success for the Afghan people look like? And I'm reminded that Afghanistan is sometimes called the graveyard of empires. The British, the Soviets, others have been there. No one seems to have been able to get out of a quagmire in a positive or reasonably intact manner.
Well, sometimes I've thought it might better be titled the graveyard of bumper sticker aspirations, but because in fact the British did quite well in their first war until they started trying to cut the budget and do things on the cheap, when they then got into very serious problems and a disaster ensued. That was a lesson we didn't learn. In any event, the Afghans have been now at war for 40 years. It's a traumatized country. For them, a measure of peace and coming back into the modern world is definitely success. On the military side, that means their armed forces have to get a lot better to keep terrorism and violence at bay. There is a lot that's positive. There's a whole generation of young, educated Afghans now that didn't exist 16 years ago when we went into the country. They're impressive people and often the most prevalent source of optimism when I visit. Just one very small example, I'm on the board of a small voluntary organization that runs a completely Afghan-led school for girls in Kabul. It's now 30 or 40. It's working to add a year every year and become a full-fledged high school. Last time I was there in October, I had breakfast with the girls. And we're sitting at the table, there must be 10 of them from about that high to sixth graders in the breakfast, and I went around and I asked, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I don't know what answers you'd get out of American second, third, fourth graders, but I don't think they'd be terribly articulate. They went around, I want to be a teacher, I want to be a lawyer, I want to be a business entrepreneur, I want to be a judge and bring more law into my country. I mean, I don't know if they'll all grow up to do what they said they wanted to do, but it was a fascinating demonstration of this other side of Afghanistan, of a new generation that wants to develop their country and can. And they have had some success. You know, for all the troubles of corruption, they have had a peaceful change of power as a result of an election. You have to go thousands of miles from Kabul to find another country in any direction that's had a peaceful change of government as a result of an election.
Let me broaden the conversation just a bit. You've served as ambassador to 3 countries. You've had assignments in a number of others during your time in the Foreign Service. And as you know, there's some debate going on today in Washington about funding for the State Department, funding for diplomacy. What are your views on the role of diplomacy vis-a-vis the military in situations like the one we've been talking about?
You know, I've been in 4 wars. 1 as an infantry officer and 3 as a diplomat, and had my embassy attacked by mobs. You know, I've got a fair appreciation for the military side of this thing. The military and we, the diplomats, know we have to work together. First of all, diplomacy is enormously important to trying to avoid wars. Second, it continues during war. And third, it's incredibly important to how you terminate a war. A great deal of what we screwed up in Iraq, where I managed to spend 16 months, was a fact that we paid absolutely no attention to diplomacy, to local culture, to the things we pay diplomats to do. Diplomats are in many cases, they're the first line of security. They're present in almost every country in the world. They're the only source in many cases for good policy advice before an administration makes decisions. So the idea that you can just chop diplomacy and come out better, I think, is a mistake. Also, I think probably very few Americans understand just how little we spend on diplomacy, which is less than 1% of the federal budget. And within the State Department's meager budget, only about 5 or 6% of that is personnel. So, you know, you can cut away at diplomacy and it won't make a rounding error's difference on what you're trying to fund for defense, which I happen to support.
Well, we look forward to hearing much more on these topics this afternoon, but I want to thank you for being our guest here on campus. We've been talking with Ambassador Ronald Neumann, former U.S. Ambassador to Afghanistan and a guest on Hope College's campus as part of the Great Decisions discussion series.